Thank you for joining us with this webinar, Decoding Personal Care Products. This is an area I didn't really know a lot about. I've been buying organic products for a long time, as I buy all my food and everything is organic for like 20 some years, but there's a lot of things I didn't realize until I met Sharon a little over 2 years ago. It's about 2.5 years ago at a TACA conference. And she started teaching me about how things are hidden in personal care products and how there's a lot of chemicals that are very damaging. And you know, it kind of opened my eyes, and I'm really grateful to Sharon. So I've asked her to come on and do this webinar to share her information with us. So I'm going to turn it over to her.
Great. Thank you so much for the introduction, Nancy. It's kind of a startling issue, and there's a lot that people don't understand. So I'm really happy to share my knowledge with everybody today. So I'm going to start screen sharing now. And let's see. Okay. Okay, can you see my presentation?
I can see it.
Okay, good. Thank you. All right, so I'm going to jump right in. So the title of the presentation is Decoding Personal Care Product Labels and Avoiding Toxins in Everyday Products. But before we begin with the meat of the presentation, I want to tell you a little bit about myself. My husband and I were married in 2002. We got married a little bit older, so we immediately started trying to have a family. And it didn't take long to realize that we were going to need some medical intervention in order to get pregnant. So after about 1.5 years of trying and a couple of in vitro fertilization attempts, we did eventually get pregnant with my oldest son, who's now 11, but we were indeed one of those 1 in 6 couples that experience infertility. And then when my oldest son was very young, we realized pretty early on, or I felt very early on, that something was kind of off with my son. And when he was about 15 months old, he was diagnosed on the autistic spectrum. At the time, it was too early to determine how severe. He was not one of those sort of classic cases that you hear about of children regressing into autism. He was more of a slow to develop, lots of developmental delays and kind of odd behaviors along the way. And way back then, when he was a toddler, I learned that many children on the spectrum have trouble detoxifying, which is a whole separate discussion in and of itself. But at the time, I did the best that I could to create a non-toxic household. And, you know, admittedly, I didn't go overboard, but I did make my own cleaning supplies for a while and switched to some brands that I felt were safer, like California Baby and whatnot. And then it wasn't until 2014, when I was diagnosed with breast cancer at the age of 43, that I really began to realize I had a passion for creating a safer world. And I consider myself today a non-toxic educator and a wellness advisor. I'm not a physician. I have a business background, but I've done a lot of research, and I'm really passionate about the information that I'm going to share with you today. Okay, so let's jump into how we're doing here in the United States in the personal care products industry. And one of the most startling statistics that you may have heard this before, is that in the European Union, they ban over 1,300 chemicals from personal care products, whereas here in the United States, we ban only 11. Now that's a pretty big difference, and it's even more startling when you realize that in many cases, it's the same manufacturers producing products for both markets. They leave the harmful chemicals in for distribution in Europe, but they take them, other way around. They take the harmful chemicals out for distribution in Europe, but they leave them in here in the United States because nobody is stopping them. And by and large, it's cheaper. So think about like Procter & Gamble and Unilever. These are global companies. One of the questions that I commonly hear when I present this information is, well, what are disease rates like in Europe? And I can't quote specific statistics in Europe. They're not terribly different than they are from here in the United States. But what you need to remember is that there are over 80,000 chemicals in commerce. So even 1,300 really is just a drop in the bucket. But you have to admit that Europe is doing a better job than we are here in the United States. Now, thinking about where we use these products on our body, our skin is our largest organ, and your skin absorbs what you put on it. Think about drug patches like an estrogen patch or a seasickness patch or an ADHD medication. These are transdermal patches, and the medication is delivered through your skin. And according to Dr. Samuel Epstein, who's the former head of the Cancer Prevention Coalition, he says it's more dangerous to put a product on your skin than it is to eat it. And this is because your digestive system, by and large, is designed to detoxify, whereas your skin doesn't offer that same protection, and it is a direct route into your bloodstream. Now, what might we come into contact with through our skin? Think about the average woman. Some research was conducted several years ago by the Environmental Working Group, and they found that the average woman is exposed to 168 chemicals before she even leaves the house in the morning. Think about your routine. You've got soap, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, lotions, goes on and on. And men are not immune from these issues. They are affected as well. Of course, women do tend to use more products, but that is a generalization, and men need to keep an eye out as well. Okay, so let's look at the industry for purposes of this discussion, as well as how the government looks at things. Cosmetics are defined as products intended to cleanse or beautify. So some examples are moisturizers, perfume, lipstick, makeup, shampoo, conditioner, deodorant, and even hair coloring. And cosmetics would exclude products that are designed to treat or prevent a medical condition. So of course, those excluded products would include pharmaceuticals that you get from your local pharmacy through your doctor, but also products that must carry a drug facts label are antiperspirant because they prevent sweating, diaper cream because it treats diaper rash, dandruff shampoo, sunscreen, and there are a handful of others. So if you're shopping for these types of products that are designed to treat or prevent and they don't have a drug facts statement on the packaging, that's in violation of what the FDA requires. And it's possible that the FDA could come down kind of hard on that company and then work with them to make the changes that they need to. So we're focusing primarily today on the cosmetics side. Okay, so I talked about the FDA. When we look at US law for personal care products, there's only 2 laws that apply to this category. It does come under the jurisdiction of the FDA. And the 2 laws are the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act of 1938, so quite some time ago, and the Fair Packaging and Labeling Act of 1967. So the first one, dictates things about the product should not be adulterated or misbranded. And by misbranded, I mean things like having accurate quantity statements. And there are a few exclusions from this law. Coal tar colors are one that are excluded, and these are in hair dyes, and as well as some makeup products. And there's a loophole that I'm going to talk about a little bit further, a couple of slides in. The Fair Packaging and Labeling Act of 1967 is really more with regard to commerce. So with regard to our free market economy here in this country, consumers should be able to obtain accurate quantitative information to facilitate value comparisons to help them make purchasing decisions. And this act applies to retail labeling, measurements, legibility of ingredients, serving sizes, and so on and so forth. And then the other thing that falls under this labeling act is that if there is an undue proliferation within a specific product category, the Secretary of Commerce may request that manufacturers work together to develop measurement standards for that industry. And again, that's just a request, it's not a mandate. So those are the 2 laws that have been in place for quite some time. Now, current legislation, a law did pass just last month. It's called the Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act for the 21st century. And this was Senator Lautenberg from New Jersey. He passed away fairly recently, and he really spearheaded this legislation, and it's obviously named after him. Now, this law is geared more towards the companies that make the chemicals, the ingredients, not specifically to the manufacturers of the finished goods. But it does require the EPA to set priorities for evaluating chemicals. Again, I mentioned earlier that there's over 80,000 chemicals in commerce. So this act starts to scratch the surface, and I didn't get a chance to look up the exact number, but I know that there is some, there's some disappointment with regard to that. It's a very small number of chemicals that will be evaluated on an annual basis, but it's a small step in the right direction. And then literally just announced last week, New Jersey Reps Pallone and Lance are proposing legislation to update that 1938 law, which would give the FDA power to review the safety of ingredients and to order recalls. So as it stands right now, the FDA cannot mandate a recall for any personal care product. They can help a company to facilitate a recall, but it's truly up to the company to decide if they want to and if it's in their best interest to conduct a recall. So this proposed legislation will also require companies, manufacturers, to attest to safety of products before they sell them, to report consumer injuries to the FDA, and to include warning labels on products if they aren't suitable for all family members. Okay, so let's dig a little bit deeper about cosmetic safety. Here's a quote directly from the FDA website. The FDA does not have the legal authority to approve cosmetic products and ingredients before they go on the market. They also do not have a list of tests required for any particular cosmetic product or ingredient. So if you're assuming that products are safe just because they're on store shelves, that is absolutely not the case. There is a cosmetics ingredient review board, which was established back in 1978 with FDA support. It is 100% funded by industry. The FDA participates but doesn't vote. There's an expert panel that reviews what they consider high priority ingredients. And this could involve a literature search of scientific literature that is already out there, and this review board can also call on industry to make data available if they haven't already, if it's studies or research that the company has done themselves, or they can also call on industry to conduct new testing. And again, this is policed entirely by the industry itself. And in 40 years, the Cosmetics Ingredient Review has declared only 11 ingredients to be unsafe. Those 11 that I referred to earlier, and actually 3 of them are conditional. So an example of one of those conditional ones is mercury, which is not allowed in cosmetics except for in mascara, where it is assumed that there is no other safe option in terms of a preservative in mercury, which we do know to be the case because there are safe options that don't include mercury in them.
This is incredible. I have to tell you, every time you share this information with me, I'm blown away.
It's kind of mind-blowing, yes. Okay, so those chemicals, what are they maybe contributing to here in the United States? I mentioned the Environmental Working Group earlier. They're a fabulous organization, consumer sort of watchdog agency, and they cover many different industries. But in 2004, they conducted a benchmark investigation and found over 200 chemicals in babies' cord blood. Our babies are being born pre-polluted. And again, specific in my case with autism, you do hear about a lot of those regression cases, but there are many kids that are, there never really was, a baby without any environmental, issues going on, because it depends on what the mom has been exposed to. Okay, cancer. This will affect 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women. Autism, the current numbers released by the CDC are 1 in 68 US children and 1 in 42 boys. When my son was diagnosed in 2006, or when he was born in 2005, it was like 1 in 150. And it's truly been a staggering increase since the 1970s. When I was growing up, those numbers were 1 in 10 to 15,000. Now, you sometimes hear people quote things like better diagnosis, and it has been said that that accounts for a small portion of the increase, but nowhere near all of it. There are lots of environmental issues going on all around us. And on the other end of the age, the life cycle is Alzheimer's disease. There are currently 5 million Americans living with Alzheimer's, and that's projected to increase to over 7 million by 2025. So I'm guessing that most people who are tuning into this webinar have been affected by 1 or 2 or possibly even 3 in their immediate families. Okay, so I'm also guessing that you guys have started to think about the products that you use in your home. Literally every room of the house, there's the potential for products that are unsafe, that are commonly used, whether it's, toothpaste and shampoo in your bathroom, fabric softener in your laundry room, air freshener, even candles, of course, household cleaners and dish detergent. So it's really just a matter of knowing what to look for on your labels, and we're going to start that education process here today. So the 2 main topics that I'm going to be covering are organic certification and what that means, and I'm also going to be talking about fragrance, which I affectionately refer to as the F word. And truly, if there's one thing that you take away, if you're only going to remember one thing from this webinar, is to avoid anything with fragrance. Okay, so organic certification. What does this really mean? It does indicate that the company, as well as the product with the seal, has rigorous quality assurance procedures in place. I am not privy to all of the checks and balances that need to be conducted in order to receive organic certification as a manufacturer, but I do know that it's a lengthy process. And you would start with your facility if you were a manufacturer, and then that doesn't necessarily mean that every product in the line is organic certified just because it's made in that plant, but it does mean that there are these quality assurance procedures in place, lots of checks and balances, which is obviously a really good thing. Now, keep in mind, you see in that little green seal I put in the top left corner, this is a program, the Organic Seal is a program of the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and it was originally intended for food products. There is not a separate seal. There might be separate certifiers, but there's truly not a separate list of requirements for a personal care product versus a food product. And this requires that 95% of ingredients in that product are organic. And that's all well and good for some produce that you buy at the grocery store, but when you're looking at personal care products and even processed food items, that extra little 5%, that other 5%, could have some harmful chemicals in there. So just because it has that seal doesn't mean you can trust that there's absolutely nothing in there that, that could be harmful. Moreover, there are a specific set of approved preservatives that could be used in an organic certified product. And an example that I'd like to reference that you see very often on some food labels, on some infant medications, I've seen it on gas drops, as well as many personal care products, is an ingredient called sodium benzoate. And in a rinse-off product, like a shampoo or a soap, this can be up to 2.5% of the product ingredients by weight. That percentage is a little bit less for leave-on products. But sodium benzoate is considered GRAS by the FDA, and that stands for generally regarded as safe. So there's really not a lot of testing. However, if you dig a little bit deeper, you find that when sodium benzoate is combined with vitamin C or E, it can react and form benzene, which is a known carcinogen. And think about your organic personal care products. There are very often, essential oils that are used in those products, both for their beneficial properties as well as for the scent of them. And these oils are very rich in vitamin C or E. So you want to make sure that your product labels don't have the word sodium benzoate in the ingredient listing. And similarly, there's certain safe preservatives that are not allowed. They're not considered approved in USDA certified products. And a great example of that is radish root ferment. And if you think back to before the days of refrigeration, people hid their people just clicked on hide on that little pop-up. But anyway, people would preserve their fruits and vegetables over the long winters when they couldn't do their farming. They would ferment their vegetables and keep them in a cool, dark place. And radish root ferment is also an ingredient in kimchi, which is a Korean sort of appetizer of sorts that is fermented. And it is an effective preservative. But again, it's not on that list of USDA certified preservatives. Okay, so I'm going to move now to fragrance. On your product labels, you want to look for the words fragrance, perfume, or parfum. These are catch-all words that are considered a trade secret, so they are exempt from the laws that I referenced earlier, and they could be hiding literally hundreds of ingredients, and manufacturers don't have to disclose what those ingredients are because nobody wants their signature scents to be copied. Now, a couple of months ago, somebody had asked me to research a popular moisturizer product that's made by a very large company. And I went to the company's website, I looked up the product, and there are some companies that make it easy to find ingredient listings, and some companies make it a little bit harder. But this company did make it very easy. I found the ingredient listing, and the word fragrance was a hot link. So I clicked on that. And it took me to a document that was 20 pages long, and the first page was a little description about fragrance and why fragrance is so important to the consumer experience, that talking about the senses, and like, I get it, people want things to smell good, but truly at what cost? So I turned to the next page and started to look at a list of two columns per page. And I'm not kidding, it was probably 8, maybe 10-point font max, double columns on each page, 20 pages, a list of any ingredient that could be on any product that contains fragrance in this multinational conglomerate company. That's a lot of ingredients. And how is anybody to know if they're allergic to one, or if it's got any kind of other issues that could cause some health issues? Now, speaking of common health issues with fragrance, perfume, or parfum, again, the Environmental Working Group conducted some research a few years ago and found that 75% of products that have fragrance contain phthalates. It's spelled right there, PHTHALATES. So phthalates make fragrances linger longer. They also make plastics pliable and vinyl pliable, but truly at what cost? This class of chemicals, they're endocrine disruptors. And the Environmental Working Group, you may have heard the Dirty Dozen with regard to produce. Environmental Working Group every year releases the list of Dirty Dozen produce that's most heavily treated with pesticides. And they do more recently have a Dirty Dozen list of endocrine disruptors, and phthalates are ranked 4 out of those dozen. And one of the things that the Environmental Working Group cites is that endocrine disruptor, phthalates in particular, can signal testicular cell death, early cell death. So phthalates are linked to lower sperm counts in men, male reproductive birth defects, hormone changes, and one of the things I'm seeing with regard to endocrine disruptors, I talk about them quite a bit. What they're finding is that very small quantities, exposure to very small quantities can have a pretty big impact within the body. Your hormones are very, very sensitive. Phthalates are also linked to diabetes and obesity and thyroid irregularities. Okay, so there are several other categories that we're going to discuss on a future webinar, but I wanted to provide this list as things to keep in mind when you're shopping for personal care products. So when you consider your products and your products ingredients, the top thing you want to see is their full ingredient disclosure. In other words, does it say fragrance and you don't know what's in there, or is it telling you what they're using to scent the product? Is the product natural and without synthetics? And are the ingredients without synthetics? Do those ingredients come only from non-GMO sources? Are there any petroleum byproducts? Petroleum is a huge category that, we could go on about all the other, names that it goes by. Think about, Vaseline, petroleum jelly. It's ubiquitous. It's in so many products in so many different forms. And it's derived from crude oil. Do your ingredients contain any formaldehyde sources or donors? So what can happen sometimes is, those 80,000 chemicals in commerce, most of which are untested, even if they were all individually tested, by the FDA or an unbiased party, what happens when you combine those ingredients within the bottle? Sometimes you get byproducts that are very harmful. And there was an example, there was about 2 years ago, it was Johnson & Johnson. Some consumer, advocacy groups came down pretty hard on them because they contained an ingredient. Johnson & Johnson baby shampoo contained an ingredient that released a carcinogenic byproduct in their baby shampoo. And the ingredient was called quaternium. So, I don't typically like to identify companies when I do my presentations. However, this was a very highly visible, in national news that Johnson & Johnson did agree to take that ingredient out of its baby product, which is great. And they said, we think it's safe. However, we understand that consumers don't want it in there. So keep that in mind as we move through towards the end of this webinar. Some other things that go on in the industry is that there are ingredients there are companies that irradiate things, and there are ingredients that are grown on sewer sludge. So how would you know that? You typically don't know that. Similar to the formaldehyde donors that I talked about, there are ingredients that use harmful catalysts or processing aids to make the ingredients. So how would you know if ingredients in the products you're putting on yourself or your children contain these harmful catalysts? It's very difficult. Are your products gluten-free and soy-free? Now, granted, that's not important to everybody, but it's important to a large number of people. And is there periodic third-party testing from an outside, third-party lab to ensure product safety and product integrity?
Sharon, I just want to comment that soy is usually genetically modified. So, there's problems with that. I tell people to avoid soy all the time. And to me, it doesn't matter whether if it's in a skincare product or you're eating it. I don't think, unless it's organic, to stay away from it.
I agree 100%. Soy is also an endocrine disruptor, so even if it is GMO free, interesting. If you are diagnosed with breast cancer, which I hope you are not, however, if that is to happen, there are the pathology looks at three main things. Is the tumor estrogen receptive? Is it progesterone receptive? And is it HER2 positive? Now, I don't want to go into all the details of that, but it is not uncommon for breast cancer tumors to be estrogen receptive, which means that estrogen can fuel a tumor's growth. When the first day that I met with my oncologist, when I was starting treatment, I also already had my pathology. I knew that the tumor was estrogen receptive, and the only lifestyle change that she told me, which surprises me now with so much that I know, was to not eat soy for exactly that reason. So yes, actively avoid soy. I also think it is not good to give young children soy. Like you said, it's just really not good for anybody. So, you could look at this long list and say, well, gosh, is it safe to use anything? Maybe I'll just use coconut oil. And coconut oil can be great as a moisturizer, but it's kind of hard to wash your hair with it. But I have been looking for safe products for a super long time, and the cleaning supplies were kind of easier for me when my son was little. But my personal care products, even though I consider myself relatively low maintenance, I struggled to find safe products. And the company that I represent today, Pure Haven Essentials, this list is what they have. Every single ingredient supplier signs a legal affidavit attesting to all of these criteria. This is just how important this company feels about educating people and transparency in ingredients and products. So, they provide this information that you can rest assured that none of these are an issue with any products from the Pure Haven Essentials line. Okay, so I know it can be really overwhelming. I've got a number of things that you can do to make a difference, not only for yourself, but for the world. I don't want you to be an ostrich and stick your head in the sand. It's easy to learn all this and get overwhelmed and feel like, well, there's really not many safe options, so I'm just going to keep doing what I'm doing. There actually are a lot of things that you can do to make changes, and sometimes it's just small changes that lead to, to big change. The first is, I encourage you to always read your product labels. You want to turn the bottle around. Don't trust the burst on the front of the bottle. It could say, certified organic and paraben free, and I call it chemical whack-a-mole. That sometimes there are these buzzwords that come up, like BPA was a great example, baby bottles in particular and sippy cups. So consumers get all up in arms about a single ingredient, and they put pressure on manufacturers, and they take the offending ingredient out, but sometimes what they put in is either not much better or sometimes even more harmful. So don't trust those bursts on the front of the label. That's all marketing. It's really all about the ingredients. So even if it's certified organic, you still want to look at those ingredient listings. You definitely want to avoid fragrance and be suspicious of hidden ingredients. There's not a lot of there's no regulation behind the claims on the front of the bottle. So it could say natural. Certified organic is one thing, but natural or pure or green, that doesn't really mean anything. And again, that's marketing. So if it says natural fragrance, and I know there are products out there that claim to be healthier than what you buy, the mainstream products that are advertised on television and whatnot, it could say, for example, natural fragrance. Well, they're still not telling you what's in there. So what does that mean?
Well, and I also want to say that in the food industry, there's something called natural flavors or natural flavoring, and that's usually a code word for glutamate, which is neurotoxic. So just because, it's listed as being natural, again, it doesn't really matter what the product, whether it's a food or personal care product, you definitely need to be suspicious of that.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Okay, so also I would love for you guys to mark your calendars for our next webinar on this topic, which will be Wednesday, October 19th, again at noon. And stay informed by liking my Facebook page, which is Non-Toxic News from Sharon. I share a lot of information and articles on this issue. Very often I repost things that are coming from organizations such as the Environmental Working Group, which I've mentioned a number of times today, the Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, Safer Chemicals, Healthy Families. There's a number of really great nonprofit groups that are on Facebook if you just look for them.
Can you also just let everybody know what the topic will be of our next webinar?
Oh, yeah. So it will be on carcinogens and neurotoxins in personal care products. I'm going to wait and see if I've got room to add another topic in there because I don't want to overwhelm all at once. But for sure, the carcinogens, those carcinogenic byproducts, and neurotoxins, which, yes, there are neurotoxins in your personal care products. We will talk more. Yeah, okay. So continuing with what else you can do, you can vote with your dollars. Every time you purchase a product that contains harmful chemicals, you are telling those manufacturers, as well as our government, that it's okay to put harmful chemicals, in the environment and on our bodies and on our children. And I don't think that's okay. You can also shop, so you can choose to shop what I have found to be the safest line of personal care products on the market, and that is Pure Haven Essentials. If you use this link, purehaven.com/embody health, proceeds of every purchase made through that link will support Nancy's initiatives to provide wellness information. And I just have to say, Nancy, I'm so honored to be doing this webinar with you, because I know you've covered such amazing topics and had such fantastic speakers that I'm just honored to be part of this. And I, for one, want to see these initiatives continue, because I think they're fantastic.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled to be working with you too.
Oh, thank you. So a little more detail on using this shopping link, in terms of getting the most for your money. Through October 31st, when you shop at that link that's at the top of the screen, if you enter event number 167094 during checkout, you'll receive a free gift from me through the mail. I will send you a lip balm and an educational flyer. And then also, anytime you purchase, if you make a purchase of $95 or more, you will automatically get a free item added to your order. That's my dog barking, she's outside. This month, September, is a 1 ounce Moroccan argan oil. It's a $17 value, 100% pure, nothing else in the bottle. And then better yet, you could sample $300 worth of products from Pure Haven Essentials for just $99 plus shipping and tax. And to do that, please contact me for details. You can either call me, my phone number is listed there, and my email is nontoxicsharon@hotmail.com. So that's it for today.
Can you put your, go out of the screen mode so we can see you again?
Yes.
There she is. So if anybody's watching, does anybody have any questions for Sharon? She's the expert here for sure. This is still new for me, so feel free to ask any questions. And if not, I want to thank you for joining us. And we have a series of webinars lined up, and you can get more information about the webinars at Embody Health on Facebook. So look for me. I'm Embody Health and Wellness, and there's no E at the beginning, just starting with an M. So thank you, Sharon.
You're very welcome. Thank you, Nancy.